Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Poe, and today I'd like to do a discussion of the book Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is a contemporary romance that I first heard about from Kazen at Always Doing. I will link her channel as well as her standalone review below. Based on her glowing review, I thought I've got to pick up this book, and I was so glad that I did. I loved this book. It was so great, and I just really want to gush not only about why I loved it so much, but why I really think we need more romances that are like this. I have been a long time romance reader. For over 2 decades. I have been reading in the genre, mainly historical and paranormal romance. But what I have found in the past couple of years was that I was getting very bored of the genre and I wasn't picking it up very much, simply because a lot of the tropes, a lot of the plot lines were reused and were not really gripping to me anymore, especially as I had become an adult and I had gotten married. And I found that many of the ways that the characters interacted just seemed childish or problematic to me. So I've been looking for romances that suit who I am and what my tastes are now a lot better, and this one really did it. So I'll talk about kind of what the story is about, as well as what I thought it did so well that made me want many more romances of this style. So first, let me talk about what the story is about. This is a contemporary romance set in England. The main character is Chloe Brown, who is an upper-class, very rich Black woman who deals with chronic pain. And that chronic pain is something that developed in adulthood and has severely impacted her life, not only because it makes it very hard for her to do day-to-day activities, but also because it has impacted her relationships with people and in many ways isolated her from anyone who isn't close family, especially because that chronic pain makes dealing with her sometimes difficult because she isn't always able to do the same things that other people are able to do. She has a near-death experience and realizes that she has grown so isolated and so introverted that her life is sort of boring, and she realizes she needs to get a life. So she makes a list of all the adventurous things that she wants to do, and these are kind of limited adventurousness. So things like ride a motorcycle or live on her own. She'd been living with her family up to that point, so she decides, I need to get a life, and she loves making lists, so she makes this list and she checks off the first one and moves into an apartment. That apartment is in a complex that has a superintendent called Red, and Red very nicely is a redhead, and he is a really interesting character that she's both attracted to and sort of has tension and frustration with from the beginning. Red comes from the other side of the tracks. He's white, he's poor, and he's got sort of a difficult past where he had been in a previous relationship with another woman who was very upper class that had been very abusive, and he's got sort of a chip on his shoulder when it comes to anybody who's got kind of the high class accent and attitudes like Chloe. He also is a painter, and he's very creative and emotional, but he's going through this kind of big depressive stage after such a traumatic and abusive relationship that he got out of. So they come together, they find themselves very much drawn to each other, but also triggered by each other. They each have their own issues that they're trying to work through that when they interact sometimes overpower them and make it difficult for them to see each other through their own issues. So the story is really about them getting to know one another, getting to work through those issues and become both stronger as individuals as well as form a new and wonderful relationship. So now I'd like to talk about some of the aspects of this book that I thought were done really outstandingly and act as sort of a guideline for what I'd like to see many more romances do. The first of which is that the relationship between Chloe and Red is based on respect and consideration. As anybody who's been in a relationship, you know that respect and consideration are just the key thing to having a long-term healthy relationship, because you need to be able to listen to another person, respect what they have to say, respect their boundaries, and learn how to deal with each other on kind of equal footing. And I think that in this book, Chloe and Red do a really great job of that. Red especially is very good at listening to Chloe and respecting her boundaries. Because she is dealing with chronic pain and the sort of differences that that makes in the way she lives her life from her disability, he has to come up to speed on a lot of those things. He has to ask her about what she needs, what she wants, and even sometimes when he might want to do things for her, he is very considerate and very kind and asks her what she wants rather than just doing it for her without asking. And that to me is so adult and so key and just wonderful. I loved that aspect. Constantly, they are checking in with each other, they are communicating, they're trying to understand each other and just respect what each person needs, even when what the other person needs is a little bit of space so that they can come to terms with what's going on before they can reconnect. And I found that that was beautiful in this story. Another aspect that makes this book really stand out to me is how fun it was. This book is filled with humor and joy and cuteness and silliness, and it just is so uplifting, which is one of the key things that I'm looking for when I read a romance. I want to feel really joyful and uplifted when I read one. This book did that. Talia Hibbert writes so well. Her dialogue is so funny, so witty. The situations that she puts her characters in are hilarious. She has so many cute scenes. I really liked that, like Chloe, for example, will sit in a pile of pillows in a onesie pajama in various scenes. And it's just adorable and comfy and cozy and sweet. And those are just the emotions that I'm looking for when I come into a romance that made this so wonderful. And the last thing that I thought was done super well in this book is interesting, considering my previous point, which is that it addressed some really deeper themes. So although I want a romance novel to be uplifting and sweet, I also really like it when it addresses some important concepts and themes, and this one did that in spades. So while the tone of the story is very funny, a lot of the issues that are addressed are really big issues. So for example, disability is one of the key things that this story is about, and in fact, if you're not familiar with disability, I think this book actually acts as a great primer to what it's like for somebody to live with disability and what sort of interactions they're looking for, how to respectfully interact with someone who has a disability. I think it's just an excellent book to understand that perspective, and it addresses it really, really well in terms of how somebody with disability can be in relationships and what sort of hurdles they might have to overcome. Similarly, Red has dealt with a lot of abuse in his previous relationship. His previous girlfriend was very emotionally abusive, and he's got a lot of trauma because of that. He's often triggered by various things that Chloe does, which are not necessarily her fault, but they remind him of something in his previous relationship. So this book goes into a lot of detail in how he has to deal with those emotions, with being triggered, and how sometimes he doesn't act the best way. He pulls away or he is afraid because of how traumatic that experience was. And so looking at what kinds of trauma people can go through and how that can inhibit them starting new relationships. It was a very deep theme, but it was treated really well in this book. One other theme that I thought was well done in this book was that of race and class. Both Red and Chloe come from very different races and classes. Red is white, but of like a poorer class, and Chloe is black, but of a rich class. And they have to navigate the way that they interact with each other, the way that they have expectations of each other, of how they should act, and it's really interesting seeing them negotiate and navigate those differences while also identifying some of the similarities, because they both in a sense come from marginalized groups. So I thought that these themes were done really, really well. They were addressed very concisely, very tactfully in this story, but woven into a really beautiful story about two people falling in love and coming together. So overall, I just thought that Get a Life, Chloe Brown represented what I want to see in romance. I think that we're entering a new wave of romance, I hope, that focuses on really being adults and dealing with real world situations, but in a joyful way that has a lot of hope and promise. I am so thankful that Kazen at Always Doing not only talked about this book, but she also linked me a list on Goodreads, which I will link below, called Radical Romance. And so it's a list of romance novels that address social justice themes. I'm very hopeful that we're going to see a lot more books popping up within this genre, because this is definitely one of my favorite genres that I'm going to have to read a lot of the things on that list of, and I hope more new releases come out. If you have read any romance novels that you think address social justice themes, please also let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear them. I have read a couple of things on the Radical Romance list, and many of the others are already on my TBR, but I'm always looking for more recommendations. Also, if you haven't subscribed to Kazen, you definitely should. She reads really interesting things, not just romances, lots of nonfiction and all sorts of other things. But if you like romances, definitely subscribe to her because she's got great recommendations. If you guys have read Get a Life, Chloe Brown, please let me know what you thought below, or if you're interested, definitely let me know.